Um, this is my first time going live from my new phone. I just got an iPhone 13 Pro Max, and it's so much bigger than what I'm used to, but I got used to it so quickly because, I don't know, it's not as big as I thought it was going to be. It's just comfortable. It is heavy though, but anyway, I hope the sound quality is good. I hope everything is like it normally is. Hopefully it's better, but hopefully it's not worse. um, Hi. Okay, so as I said in the description, I don't know if you guys see the description, but I always put a description. I don't think there's a video on my channel that doesn't have a description. But as I said in the description, this was unplanned. I just kind of felt like going live. I just needed to vent a little bit. Um, I was just thinking about some stuff, and I realized that I had some stuff to say, and I was originally gonna do just religion, and then I started talking about political stuff, and I realized that I needed to vent about that too. So hopefully this won't be too long, but I usually don't do these during the day either, so this is a little bit unusual for me. But I just needed to talk, and I realized that I was going to be talking to myself anyway. I might as well turn on the camera so that at least some people might be able to hear me. My last video, I think, got like 200 views or something. Not that many comments, maybe like one or two, but it got a good amount of views, which is unusual. So it was just called Words. It was almost a 2 hour live stream. It was a little over a week ago. And I was going to do another one the next day, but I just didn't feel like it, so I didn't. I'm only going to do it if I feel like it. You know, that's the whole idea. It's not going to be good if I'm doing it because I feel like I have to. Um, well, that's not necessarily true. I actually work better on a schedule, but um, I don't currently have a schedule for videos, and I'm working on getting back a schedule. I just need to plan some stuff out. But for now, it's just random live streams, so I'm just going to get into it, not waste your time. Sorry if you are watching this as a replay and you had to sit through that and you wanted to hear about the topic. So I'll just get right into it. Politics and religion, the two big things that you're not supposed to talk about because it's controversial. These are things people don't like to talk about, people don't like to think about. You just kind of want to go throughout your day and get to the end of the day, and you know, you're hoping that if you're hanging out with your family, you're not going to find out that they have completely opposing political views and religious views that end up making you feel like you're never going to be able to look at them in the same way. And if you do find that out, you would prefer to just pretend you didn't and brush it under the rug. Although I find that usually it's the people who are, if you think of politics as like left and right, usually the people on the right are usually the ones saying, let, you know, we can have different political opinions and still be friends. I find that people on the left are a little bit more like, hey, if your views are that opposing, then it's not really a matter of like different opinions. It's not like, oh, you like your coffee without sugar and I like mine with sugar. It's like you think that certain people don't deserve the same rights as other people or whatever it is. Like it's a matter of morality, and the people on the right don't seem to see it that way in most cases, because I'm gonna get into it. I can't possibly summarize that in a quick statement, but I always am thinking about the details of what's going on and what's happening. And what I was saying that made me want to go live, what I was just thinking about that I would have gone on a whole spiel just by myself, and I said, let me turn on the camera, was I was saying that there's really no left and right, because I always am talking about America, by the way. If you don't live in America, I know I have people from all over the world who can watch my channel. It's not just, you know, aimed at a specific audience. I try to keep it generic for anybody, but if I talk about politics, I'm usually talking about things concerning America because that's where I live, that's where I've always lived, and that's what I know the most about. Um, I know about other countries and other political systems and other tons of other religions, but I know the most religion-wise about Christianity and American politics. So that's usually what I'm referring to, but I still try to keep it open so that no matter where you are in the world, you're going to be able to understand what I'm saying and relate to it on some level. But if I get specific and you can't relate to it, at least you still know what I'm talking about. Um, so I just like a disclaimer, I like to give that in every video. because I don't know if I have the same people watching or if it's a new person watching. But anyway, um, I think of, you know, it's a little bit of history. It's stolen land, and I don't really think it should be a surprise that you get a society when, what happened was that a bunch of people came over, and what happened was that a bunch of, basically, new person watching. Well, hello. Um, I don't have my glasses on for this, so I have to lean in to see the comments. I might just put them on real quick, actually. That's usually what I end up doing, because I like to clean them before I put them on. But if I'm going to do it while I'm live, I'm not going to bother, because they're never, like, dirty. They're just good enough. Alright. I don't have terrible vision, I just don't have, like, crystal clear vision. It's not 2020. um, but it is when I have these on, so I don't have to squint or anything to see comments. So, it's you have a bunch of people who are basically murderers, rapists, white supremacists bringing over slaves, and you can't really be surprised that a bunch of people with the mentality that you can own another human being built a society that is filled primarily with entitled, self-indulgent, just generally selfish and power focused people. And the people in America are often focused on money and power. That's often the value. And the value system, if you even look at both sides of the political scale, you realize that on both sides there's still a focus where the values system is a little bit messed up. And what annoys me about the left is that it's more pretentious. It tries to present itself as, like, righteous, and we're fighting for all these good causes, but there's always this how are we going to capitalize on this? How are we going to make money from it? How is it going to become a thing? Even spirituality, something that I talk a lot about on my channel, and something that I promote, it has been kind of tainted by that mentality of, let's appeal to this type of person. Then you get all these morons talking about astrology and their chakras, and oh, are you vibrating high or low? And they just make it sound like this ridiculous, kind of zombie mentality of these people who just, you know, don't really have any understanding of it, but it's like they're in it for the wrong reasons, and you can tell that it's this kind of self-indulgent mentality that's not really actually based in a full understanding of what you're doing. And then you have the other side who criticizes it, and they're like, here's why astrology isn't real and all this other stuff, and they attack it. And I pay attention to all of it. I don't ignore anything. I don't just, hear something and say, oh, that person disagrees with me, I'm not going to hear what they have to say. I'm always very interested to hear everything other people have to say. And, if you're going to say it directly to me, I would appreciate it if you didn't do it in a way where you're attacking me, because I'm not attacking you, I'm not attacking anybody, and I don't want to be attacked. Nobody's perfect. Sometimes I say something and I'm wrong. Sometimes I say something and it makes me come off as ignorant. I try not to. More often than not, I think I succeed at not sounding ignorant, but once in a while I do. That's okay. You can tell me. It doesn't make me a terrible person. Yeah, I might. Hold on. I want to read this, so I'm going to make it come up. Yeah, I might not understand because I'm young, but I have realized certain people only focuses on money, and maybe some with power and looks. I really feel suffocated by it. Yeah, and that's a really common issue on different levels, no matter where you are in the world, because it's just part of a mentality that we have that is based on fear. And I don't want to get too much into that because I talk about all this stuff a lot, and I want to keep this focus on politics and religion, because that's the title of the video, and I don't want people to feel clickbaited into watching me go off on a whole bunch of tangents that have nothing to do with the title. So, which I guess is better than me not talking about the title at all, because in this case you'd be getting more than what you asked for, instead of less than what you asked for. but still, it wouldn't be precisely what you asked for, what you thought you'd be getting when you clicked on it, and I want to try my best to give people exactly what they're expecting. And I'm going to do that with my edited videos. These unplanned live streams that I've been doing, they're not going to be perfect. I'm going to be going off on tangents because that's just the way that I function. I talk like that. I talk a lot, and I have to work on kind of being a little bit more focused and grounded, so I'm not losing track of my point. I work on so many tangents. I forget my original point sometimes. Usually I come back to it, but sometimes it takes me a while. Sometimes I go off so far that eventually something reminds me of it. And I'm like, oh, by the way, I was going to finish this point. And in a way, it's like I'm going in a circle because everything is connected. All of these different topics, there's so many topics, there's like infinite topics that you could talk about, but they're all connected. And that's why they all eventually lead back to each other. And I realize that even though my videos are all about different topics, they're all still kind of the same general themes. And I end up finding reasons to talk about a lot of stuff to the point where every time I make a new video, I'm like, this is my new favorite video. And I end up wanting to share it. And I'm like, I know it's 2 hours, but like, I said so much stuff that I'm proud of in this one. And I never get any real like feedback from viewers. Nobody comments anything. I say that in every video. It doesn't make a difference. It's like I say it hoping that people will hear it and be like, oh, I'll leave a comment. Nobody does. I get a couple comments in the live chat though, so I'm grateful for that. I like having people watching. It feels like I'm talking to somebody and not just rambling on and on to myself. But I was talking about people who have this mentality that, like astrology and spirituality is just a bunch of bullshit. And I understand it. I understand where they're coming from, but again, I don't think it's for the right reasons. And that's always what concerns me, is that I don't care what you do as long as you're doing it for the right reasons. I think that's what makes it good or bad. I think that if you're doing something for the right reasons, that's what makes it a good thing. The problem is that people have a very hard time understanding what that means. So I can't just say that like I just did. I have to explain it, and it 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 it's really messy and complicated. But I think you really. I just want to finish the first point that I made, is that if you look at a country like America, you tend to think that it's either left or right. You're either going to be a liberal or a conservative. You're either going to be Democrat or Republican, and and it seems like these two sides are always clashing. But what is really happening is that underneath it all, on both sides, there's this entitlement. There's this distorted value system where people, it's all based on fear. People seem to forget super obvious things. You um, you work so you can afford to be happy, and when you are paying your happiness, you're trading in happiness to work, something is wrong. And that should be obvious to people. That the whole reason you have a job is so that you can afford to live, you can afford to take care of yourself, and you can afford to be happy. That's it. That's what you're doing. You're working, putting in effort, doing a job, and you know what? You're also working to serve a community. Think of all the jobs that are necessary, the jobs that we couldn't do without. Think of like 100 years ago, before all this technology, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, when we just had like, handmade houses and all of the stuff. And not that houses aren't handmade now, but you got like cranes and all sorts of extra stuff that goes into it. It's not just like log cabins made out of wood. We're not getting water out of wells. There's so much that is different now. And back then it was a lot more clear what your role was. There were basic things that everybody does and needs, and you had your job, and as you're doing it, sure, you're doing it to make money so that you can afford to keep your house. And there's a system, but it was smaller because the communities were smaller, and it was a lot easier to keep track of things. And you could, as you're doing your work, you're like, I'm contributing to the community in some way. Now it's so messy, there's so much shit going on, you don't even know what you're actually contributing. So it's hard to do it for that reason. You just kind of do it so you can keep a roof over your head. And they set it up where you need to do that to keep a roof over your head, where if you don't work, or you don't work enough, you really are like doing maximum work for the bare minimum, and you've been brainwashed to believe that that's normal, that you don't deserve more than that. And you don't really have the time to stop and question how normal it is, because every, left and right, no matter where you turn, you're just getting told that this is the way that things are and this is the way things have to be. How could it be any other way? Well, just take a moment to look at it and actually think about it. And you have to keep this in mind the whole time. You work to be happy. When you sacrifice happiness to work, something is wrong. Just think about that. Um, you can't work and think about what you're doing. If you work at Taco Bell, are you really saying, this is my contribution to the community? No, you just get a bunch of, usually overweight, greedy, entitled assholes just ordering fast food, and they're being impatient with you. And hey, you didn't get my order right. And you're like, I don't care about this job. I'm still in high school. Like, I'm just trying to get through the day and get a paycheck so that I can get myself out into the world or afford to go to college. And then, I don't know, just whatever it is. Like, nobody really cares about what they're doing. People are just entitled. They just want what they want. Nobody's actually in it to say, no, you don't work at a fast food restaurant because you're thinking about how wonderful it'll be for the people who are eating the fast food. Usually tend to develop kind of a bitterness toward other people if you work with other people, no matter where you're working, whether it's from like a hairdresser to a banker to like just like anything. Like, if you are working and you're meeting people, you're gonna end up realizing that there's a lot of stupid and horrible, unpleasant people just floating around in the country, and and it really shouldn't be a surprise when you realize that their ancestors and the people who kind of founded and built this whole place believed that it was okay to own other people based on the color of their skin, makes them lesser, makes it okay for you to own them and do whatever you want to them. You just come in here and you rape and you call it colonization. It's just insane shit. And just bringing over murder and death and disease and destruction, and you're surprised that we ended up with a society that is primarily filled with entitled assholes. That shouldn't surprise you, and it shouldn't be a surprise to you that there is no left and right, there is no good and bad, there are no good politicians and bad politicians. It's like 99% bullshit, and with the occasional smart people who actually care, but they're outnumbered and they don't have a strong enough voice. They don't have a platform to be heard to because they barely are able to fully understand what's going on themselves, to be able to articulate it in a way that can actually make sense to other people. And then you have the issue of them not wanting to hear it, because this is the problem. People are so afraid of being uncomfortable, which brings me into religion. Um, people don't want to be uncomfortable. People are afraid of a couple things. The first one is they don't want to go to hell. That sounds terrifying. Can you imagine an eternity? You can't imagine being tortured for 5 minutes. Can you imagine for the rest of eternity? Not even just for the rest of your life, but if you were going to live forever. Time doesn't exist anymore. You're just never going to die. You're going to exist forever, but you're going to have fire all around you and you're going to be tortured for eternity. That sounds horrible. And if I were you, I'd want to avoid that at all costs. If I found out that I was going to hell for something I was doing and it was absolutely certain, I would immediately stop doing that. And I would start looking up all the different ways that I could avoid it and make amends, because I don't want to be condemned to that fate. Nobody does. So the idea of hell is automatically going to be terrifying to you, and nobody wants that fate. But the thing is that people are too afraid to think about that. It's overwhelming to a lot of people to even think about that. So they kind of numb themselves. I mean, who knows where we are going to go in the end. Yeah, but people don't want to think about it. That's the thing. People kind of numb themselves and they're like, you know, it's a joke. I'm probably going to hell. Haha. I did this and that and I'm going to hell. People just kind of make jokes about it. They don't really fully think about it. They don't really fully sit with what that would mean if it was true. And they don't understand how important it is to make sure that you fully believe, for sure that it isn't going to happen. And if I were you, I would like to rule out the possibility. I would like to make absolutely sure that there is no hell and that you're not going there if there is. And a lot of people do that, and that's where religion comes in. I consider atheism a religion because it is still based on belief. Atheism is not, exclusively based on science. Even in atheism, there is still an element of faith involved. You have faith that there is no God. You have faith that religion and, kind of magical thinking is all just a bunch of nonsense. And that is a faith because it's not a fact, it's not a proven fact. And I think that the only real way to live is to just kind of embrace the unknown. But people don't want to do that. And I'm going to explain that later. I realize that kind of sounded arrogant to say the only real way to live, but that's just the way that I worded it. It sounded dumb, but I'll explain what I meant in a couple of minutes. I just want to finish my point about people who are afraid to sit with things. These are the numb people, the people who don't really have a religion, or maybe they do, but they don't think about it too much. It's like, yeah, I was raised Catholic and blah, 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 and I'm probably going to hell, blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of not a big deal to them. They don't think about it too much. They just kind of want to sit and watch a sports game and just chill out and go to their work and just not really have to think about this stuff. Oh, I don't vote. I don't get involved in politics. It's not important to me. I just don't think about that kind of stuff. Blah blah blah. I kind of understand where conservatives are coming from. They're just little shit like that, and I get it from both sides. Like they'll say stuff like that. They're just very numb, and they're not really present. They're not passionate about anything. And if you really sit with this person, you're going to realize that they're not happy, because happiness comes from having something to be passionate about. Otherwise, you're just kind of floating around, meandering, just not really. You're just aimless, and that's what floating is. It's flying without direction. It's just kind of, I'm flying, I'm in the air, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm just kind of bopping around whichever way I end up. And that doesn't come with joy. That's kind of an in-between state. You're not sad, you're not miserable, but you're not happy either. You're just kind of there where it's safe. And you're avoiding life, but you're still alive and you're taking up space. And people have to interact with you, and if they're actually trying to go somewhere and have deep conversations with you, it's going to make them want to rip their ears out talking to you, because you just don't, you don't have the capacity to go there. You don't give yourself the credit to be able to handle topics like that, topics that actually make you think, and that maybe are overwhelming and scary. And you know this on some level. You're not stupid. You're aware of this. It's conscious. You just don't like to think about it. You don't like to have it at the front of your mind all the time. So, what I'm saying, if you're this type of person, it shouldn't make sense to you. It's not like you're listening to it and you're like, what are you talking about? I don't do that. Like, you do it and you know it. And you're like, you probably are like, yeah, I just don't like to think about it, because, what if I do go to hell? What if it is real? How can I know for sure that it isn't? And that's what I like to think about. How can you know for sure? And it's not just hell. There's all sorts of things that people believe based on their religion. And it's not always based on punishment. Sometimes it's based on reward. Sometimes they trick you into thinking it's based on morality. It's not that I'm going to get punished or rewarded for this, but it's that this is just the right thing to do. And your religion absolutely convinces you of this. I think there are two types of religious people. I think there's the religious person who kind of doesn't really care. You were brought up with that religion. You never extensively studied it. You only knew what you learned from your family or your culture, or your church, whatever it is. And you act as if that is the truth. You live in faith, but you kind of just have been like, you're not really fully there. And then there's the people who extensively study it. And I know both of these types of people, where you are actively researching and studying scripture of all different types of religions, and you're trying to find the truth. You're looking at like the four main religions. I think of like Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and I don't know, Buddhism, I guess. Those like the main religions that everyone is like aware of, and then there's more. There's a ton of religions, but those are the main popular ones. I think there's like four or five, and you know, they you can like study these all extensively and understand that there are different versions of all of them. There's like New Testament, Old Testament. With Christianity especially, there are religions and spiritual people. There's a difference. Religion, yeah, I know. I'm aware of that. You don't have to tell me that. I'm explaining. I'm trying to explain all of it. But so with the types of religious people who extensively study the religions, they're religious. I think of spiritual people as separate from religion. I don't think of that as a religion, because spirituality isn't about having a book of rules, or a book of life, basically. Here's the history of the universe and existence, and here's all the answers to all the questions you could possibly have. Anything you could ever possibly wonder, any existential crisis you could have, it's all in this book. Here's all your answers. That's to me what religion is. And it's not always a book. It's just whatever it is. It's a teaching. It's a church. It's a group. It's a religion. And to me, that's what a religion is. To me, spirituality is just saying, I understand that I'm small and the universe is big, and I'm not going to be trying to control and understand everything, but I'm just going to kind of humble myself and understand that I'm part of it. I exist, and try to understand things on a more scientific level, and understand how things work, and look at like universal laws like gravity, like what goes up must come down, just things like that, and understand how this applies in different areas of your life, and how you can use it. And then I like to think philosophically as well about it. I like to try and understand what actually is going on, and I never really stopped thinking about it. But I'm never closed off. I've never decided that I have the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I understand that there's a world that is constantly going to be lies. You're never going to be completely free from misinformation. Truth is always going to be there, but in the same way that you can't really have a shadow without a light in the first place, you can't have truth without lies. It's just, you can't have lies without truth. It's just, they're all connected, they all depend on each other, so there's always going to be lies, and you have to know that. You can't be so hell-bent on discovering the truth. And that's what these people do. I find that the ones who are brought up with a religion and they're not like actively studying it, they're just kind of the same as the people who just kind of meander about, except that they're less careless about it. They're still active and passionate about their religion, but it's less from a cognitive place and more from a primitive fear place where they're just trying to do what is the right thing. And I find that it's really radical and passionate, and it's not as much logic based and calm. And the people who extensively study religions are usually a little bit more reasonable and calm and easy to talk to, but at the same time, they're also harder to get through to because they're more convinced that they know the truth because of all the extra time that they put into it. And the reason that they put extra time into studying it is because they're trying to find the truth. It's about control. And it's against the idea of just accepting the unknown and working with it and not being afraid of it. And the only reason you would ever be afraid of the unknown is if you feel that you're not powerful enough to deal with it. If you feel weak in some way and you lack that empowering feeling. And I talk a lot about that on my Instagram and in my other videos. I talk about empowerment and all sorts of things that are really important to know about, but I try to keep it general and not really based on beliefs or religion or anything, because I don't want, a lot of religious people do that. I hear people give good advice and then out of nowhere they mention Jesus, and it's like, well, what does that have to do with anything? You're giving good advice and you're just ruining it by mentioning Jesus. Stop that. Not everybody believes in Jesus the way that you do, and you're possibly, these people hearing your advice could think it's really good advice, and then all of a sudden you're like, and I know this because Jesus showed it to me, and then in the light, and you have to go through life knowing Jesus loves you. And it's like, well, you could have just said, you have to go through life knowing that you are loved, or, just as an example of how you could, take specifics of your beliefs out of the equation. But the problem with these people is they don't think it's their beliefs, they think it's the truth. And they just think everyone else hasn't figured out that it's the truth yet. Okay, well, even in that case, you still have to understand that not everyone believes it, even if it is the truth. Not everyone else has the same mentality, and you have to be aware of who you're talking to, who's going to be able to hear you, and base it on that. Otherwise, you just sound brainwashed. You just sound like you've been fed a bunch of information. You're just walking around as if it's the truth. And the people who mention Jesus a whole bunch of times are usually not the same people who extensively study religions. Those types of people take it a little more seriously. There are the people who were brought up with a religion, the people who found it on their own. Very different types of people. But then there's the people who just don't have a religion at all. Agnostic. I'm not agnostic because agnostic is still sort of a firm stance from my understanding. Atheism is there is no God, period. You'll never change my mind. Agnostic is there may be a God, there may not be a God. We can't know. It's impossible for us to know one way or the other. I believe it is possible to know, and I definitely don't believe that there definitely isn't a God. I can't say that with absolute certainty. I think it really depends on what you think God is. And this gets into existential and philosophical stuff. I don't need to explain all this right now because that's a whole other video. But it's not important for this topic. I'm just talking about religion and politics. And I don't need to talk about my personal theories and beliefs and my understanding of existence in the universe. It's interesting, I think, but it's a separate discussion. It's a separate topic. So, you don't have to really understand all of that to be able to give someone advice or to be able to help people. And I think with politics, people get so obsessive. And what I was saying earlier is that people on the left have this pretentious facade that they're righteous. They're, oh, look at me, I'm fighting for this social cause and I'm doing this, and and this and that, and all these things that on the surface they seem nice, they seem progressive, but really they're if anything they're distracting from real deeper serious issues. You know, there's so many very serious problems, and I see people talking about them, but there's a very big difference between talking about them and actually doing something about it. How many people will, I don't know, post about something on Instagram, but then not actually, like Black Lives Matter. I feel like everybody posted a black square on Blackout Tuesday last year and then just moved on from it a week later. And the thing is that we have this mentality where that's just been normalized, you know, just with the internet, everything moves so much faster. It's what's trending this week, what's trending this week. Your phone is so addictive that you don't even realize how much you're using it and how much time it consumes out of your life, where you're used to everything going faster. You know, with the way we consume news and information, it's just one thing after another. So you don't really have the time anymore to just focus on one thing and actually be passionate about it, which is that, you know, that self-indulgent, entitled mentality that I was talking about earlier. Like, it's it's such a it's I'm always focused on joy, personal joy, and I don't want you to do anything that's going to deprive you from being able to enjoy your life and be happy and do something that you're passionate about. We all have talents. You know, you could look at a disabled person and list all the things they can't do. But I could look at you, assuming you're not disabled, and list all the things that you can't do. And that doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of things you can do that I can't do. There are all sorts of things that I can do that you can't do, things that you can do that I can't do. Vice versa, it's just going to keep going. And it's true for everybody. We need to stop focusing on the things that we can't do. We need to stop comparing ourselves to other people and focus on what we're able to do, what we're passionate about doing, and what makes us feel like we're fulfilling our life purpose, what satisfies that hole where it's like, yes, this lights my fire, this does it for me. I'm doing what I'm here to do, and you just know it. And it can change throughout your life. You're not just here to do one thing, but you have to always be willing to know. You have to always be willing to stop and say, is this really what feels right with me? Maybe you were doing the right thing and then it, you know, it ran its course and then you're still focused on it for some reason. You have to be able to let go of things and work with change, because that's one of the guarantees in the universe, is that everything is constantly changing. There's this quote I like that says, I can't remember the name of the person who first said it. It was a philosopher from a long time ago, but the quote was, "A man never steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river and he is not the same man." And what that basically means is that um, nothing is ever the same, you know, on a whatever level you measure it, whether it's like mental growth, spiritual growth, physical movement, physical growth, however you measure it, with little tiny atoms and particles and all sorts of things moving around, everything is constantly in motion in ways that you don't even see. You know, my background, for example, looks like it's perfectly still, and I seem to be the only thing moving here. But there are things about this that are not still, and everything is moving relative to something else. You know, the me moving, for example. How can you really tell if I'm moving or it's moving around me? Maybe I'm still, and my background is just working around to make it look like I'm moving, to give me the illusion of motion. You know, if that makes sense. I'm sorry if I lost you there, but everything is constantly moving, and you think of a man stepping in a river, or a woman. Just the quote was what it was, but just a person stepping in a river, and the river is constantly in motion. You step in it, then you take your foot out, then you step in it again. And you're now stepping in different water, and you are a different person than you were 2 seconds ago. And I guarantee you, you are not the same person that you were when you heard me say that 2 seconds ago, because that's how we work. We're constantly evolving. Even when we're stagnant, we're never fully stagnant, we're never fully stopped, because, you know, we may slow ourselves down, we may be resistant to move forward, because that's what we do. We are floating in a river, and we are always resistant to the idea of change, because it requires being confident, being fearless, being comfortable with the unknown. We are not comfortable with the unknown, which goes back to this hell idea that you're going to be punished Nobody wants, we're afraid of death, we're afraid of pain. Hell is both. Hell comes after death, and hell is nothing but pain. You know, we don't want to experience either of these things, and it kicks in all of our instincts to avoid these at all costs. But what it also does when it becomes disproportionate with reality is it prevents you from moving in the flow of that river, and you end up clinging to something that is just rotting and it's not going to last. You're going to eventually get stuck moving forward, but you're not going to be ready for it because you stopped believing that you're strong enough to go through it. You stopped believing that it's safe to ride the river, that you can handle your battles as you get to them. You started trying too hard to control everything and do too much, and you forgot that you are not the river, that it's not your job to control everything, and that there's a flow and you can just go with it and do your part. And, that's why being selfish and, conceited, thinking about only yourself, is actually to your detriment. It doesn't help you, it's not empowering because we don't want to be focused on ourselves all the time. That's not where your joy comes from. If you think about when you were a kid and you were a little kid doing the toddler squat, if you know what I'm talking about, when you look at a kid with a stick on the grass just bending down and poking something, you look at ants moving, you look at whatever it is you're looking at, and you're just fascinated by it. You can look at something for a long time and it feels like a long time. Maybe it's only 5 minutes, but 5 minutes back then felt like forever, didn't it? You could spend, your mom says, go out and play for 10 minutes. That's like a whole day. Jeez, 10 minutes outside? You're just waiting for it to be over because usually you want to go in and watch TV. But back then, that wasn't as big of a deal. TVs were smaller if you're my age. If you're older than me, like, hey, um, I got people saying hey and hello. Um, so anyway, I'm 20 almost. In like 2 or 3 weeks, I'll be 20. Um, but you know, when I was a kid, I still had technology. I had a DS. There were reasons that I wanted to go inside, but I was still able to appreciate the present moment. I would have time to just go in the backyard and be creative and and for anybody who doesn't know, I deactivated all of my social media except for Instagram and Twitter, because I really only ever use Instagram, and I see that I could have a use for Twitter in the future. It's not a completely pointless platform, but Snapchat, I still haven't deleted my Snapchat because there's one more person on there that I want to add, and I'm just waiting for them to respond to me so that they can make an Instagram account and I can talk to them there, and then I'll delete my Snapchat. But Facebook and all these other things, there's really I don't have any reason to keep them around. I even had Discord and Kick, like all this stuff. I just said no. I deleted all of it, rearranged my home screen, and just kept just Instagram and Twitter. So my Instagram and my Twitter are the same username, Tristan Marion Forrest, same as my YouTube channel. For anybody who doesn't know, you can find my YouTube channel by typing in youtube.com/TristanMarion4. I tried to make myself easy to find with the same URL, twitter.com/TristanMarion4, Instagram.com/ it's the same thing. It's just always the same username. And it was the same for Snapchat and all my social media as possible. Um, but I don't have a reason to have other stuff. I used to only want Instagram and Twitter, and when I got all this other stuff, it was not for the right reasons. It wasn't because I wanted it. It was because I kept meeting people who only had those things, and I eventually gave in, and I was like, fine, I'll get them. And then I ended up finding other uses for them, and it ended up becoming time consuming, and I realized that I was spending way too much time on platforms that don't really mean anything to me. So I just didn't want to do that to myself anymore. And I want to focus more on my YouTube channel and being like an active person and not just I don't know, on my phone all the time. Because like I'm talking about, it wastes your time. You used to be able to appreciate, look how I segued back to that. You used to be able to appreciate, like I was saying at the beginning of the video, it always comes back, even when I'm going off on a tangent. Sometimes things just come back to what I was saying anyway. But you used to be able to appreciate things like that when you were a kid, even if there is technology around. Very rarely do your parents let you use it before the age of 4. I think there's parents who have technology that they give to their kids when they're like 4 or 5 years old. But usually when you're like 1, 2, and 3, you're able to appreciate the present moment. So a lot of you might not remember a time like this, depending on how young you are. If you're a little older, you might remember there was less technology and you were able to be present more. As technology advances, it becomes a lot more common for people to lose touch with the present moment, which prevents them from appreciating the present moment with being grateful and with being where they actually are. They go somewhere else, and then they're all different places at once and for no reason. I don't even, what can I compare this to that'll help it make sense? It's like it's like if you're cooking something on the stove, but you're also on the phone in another room, and you're trying to play a game while you're on the phone, and then what you're cooking, you also have something in the oven and the microwave at the same time, and the sink is running, and you're trying to do dishes, all of the stuff at the same time. It's like you have to understand that you're one person. You can't do all these things at once, and it's not going to be helpful. We multitask without realizing it. We don't even realize how many things we have going on at the same time. And with me, it was like, how many people do I have to reply to? How many messages do I have to read, and stories to check up on? I always had to make sure I viewed every story on Snapchat and stuff. I don't follow anybody on Instagram, so I don't get stories popping up. I only see the stories of people that I seek out to look for their stories, which helps me to not feel overwhelmed by a bunch of unviewed stories. It also helps me to not feel like I'm the favorite playing favorites, and it's like, oh, I'm following you and I'm following you, but I'm not. It's like I either have to follow everybody or pick favorites. And I don't want to do that, so I just don't follow anybody, and that way nobody wonders. It's like, well, why aren't you following me? Take a look at my follower count. It's 0. You can't take it personally then. So that's just my preference. I don't mind it. Um, it's like that on Twitter too, and not with YouTube though. I am subscribed to people, but not on this channel. It's on my private channel. It's not really private. It's just I have a lot of unlisted videos on there that I uploaded just for me, just like music and stuff. And I'm always signed into that one. I have YouTube Premium on that one and not on this one, so I have more reason to use that. And I'm subscribed to 123 channels, and I always keep it at that number because I like seeing 1, 2, 3 at the top. So that's how I manage not subscribing to too many people. If I ever subscribe to someone new, I'm unsubscribing to somebody old. And that's just how I've done things for like the past 5 years. So, anyway, it's important to be in the present moment because that's the only way that you're actually going to be able to experience life. And you're going to end up looking like you have ADHD. People who don't have ADHD, I often see just it's normalized to just be on your phone while you're doing things that you should be able to focus on. People watching movies and browsing their phone at the same time. And it's like, well, how? And even I do that sometimes without realizing it because it's like I'm sitting here and watching this, and unless it's something really captivating and interesting, I tend to want to grab my phone out in the same way that I would grab a snack and start eating something. It's like I need to either be eating something or, I don't know, just, I don't usually go on the internet when I'm on my phone. I know this is weird, but I will go into my notes and I'll write down track lists of albums that are interesting, like track lists that I waited a long time for, or new different versions of, and then it's like this is what it ended up as, and that's exciting to know, like this is the final version and this is what it could have been, and this is what I imagined it would be. Stuff like that, it's interesting to me. Stuff like that has always been interesting to me. I used to collect like erasers and basters and compare them. I don't know why, just like stuff, comparing stuff, it's just always fun to me. I always was aware that it was weird, but I didn't care because I understood why I enjoyed it. So I just will do stuff like that, um, so that I can still pay attention, but not be like fully invested in something else. But sometimes I'm watching a show or a movie that is really interesting and it captures my attention. And if you genuinely have ADHD, you might even still have a hard time just fully focusing on something because that's what it is. It's attention deficit disorder, and I think the H stands for like hyperactive or something. I've looked into it and I studied it, and I know that there's really no difference between the two because with research they realized that ADD and ADHD are kind of the same thing. And there were originally two separate things, and they were like, it's just all ADHD. So they're always doing more research and trying to study things and understand things, but I'm always cautious because I don't want anybody what scares me is that it's a for-profit medical system, and you always have to keep in mind that they're not necessarily inclined to be completely honest with you. They might actually be inclined to withhold information or give you just enough help so that you keep coming back for more. They want to sell you shit. And they that's why I get very like, I step back if anybody ever tries to get me on a medication or anything. It's like, well, could I really do without it? Sometimes you need medication. Sometimes that is the best solution for you, but you have to make sure that it actually is the best solution for you, because there are tons of medicines and herbs and and treatments that people take that we've invented to help with issues that affect a lot of people. And what it does is that it helps you function in a way that's productive for you. And this is the other thing. You have to also ask yourself, not only is this actually going to be helpful for me, or is that person just trying to make a quick buck? Or is this person genuinely giving me something that's helpful for me, but is it only going to be helpful for me if I'm trying to fit into this corrupt system that is just designed to basically turn you into a robot worker? Because then, of course, they want you to function like all the other robots. So it's less about embracing your originality and trying to calm the parts of your personality that negatively affect you, and more about calming the parts of your personality that negatively affect the system that they want you to be a part of. I hope that made sense. So just keep these things in mind. And make sure that you're not doing anything for the wrong reasons out of fear. That's always what it's going to be. If you can trace it back to fear, it's wrong. And if you can trace it back to something that is more based in peace and faith and trust and kind of connection and empathy instead of like ego and control, and because all of that is fear. It's why do you want control? What do you need that for? Which was when we talk about when you're a kid. I realize I never finished that point. When you're a kid, you don't need control. When you're a kid, you're not focused on yourself. A kid, a little, that little kid that was looking at ants and playing with a stick in the yard, doing the toddler squat. You weren't focused on yourself. How can I get more for me? How is this going to be good for me? You weren't focused on, do people like me? Am I good enough? You were just focused on the universe. You were focused on exploring it. You were curious. Oh, what's going on here? Look at this leaf. Look at the sun. Look at this. What's this? What's that? You weren't afraid. You weren't thinking, am I good enough? Is me, me, me? You were just like, hey, I'm here. I'm me. I know I belong here. Why else would I be here? I just am part of the earth, and let me explore. And you're curious. But you understand also that since you're part of it, you have to be humble and respectful for the other things. So, you're not just an angry, maybe, some kids are more entitled in their defense. They don't have full brain capacity to be empathetic, but it's supposed to be a natural thing. Animals do this without thinking. Animals, if you actually observe the behavior, are respectful and compassionate, and they kind of work in a system. They're not, um, you know, just running around aggressively stepping on each other's shit. Animals can live in communities and societies, and they have laws. It's like, you'll see a lion kind of go like this, and it's like, do I have to kill you, or are you gonna back off? They'll growl. They won't just go, I'm gonna get you. They'll be like, they'll kind of give you a warning, and then you back off. And it's this kind of unspoken language where you don't have to say anything, but it's very clear what's being said. And if they attack, then they'll attack. But they're not just going to come at you for no reason. They come at you when they feel threatened, and they give you a warning. Humans, on the other hand, we do not operate on that same vibration. We have a very different way of functioning, and we usually operate on a lower vibration, which is all about ego and fear and control, which is foreign to animals. They don't, they don't even have the capacity to think about all the things that we think about that make us so concerned with ourselves and so afraid. Because we are more complex, and there's a lot more going on with us, which makes us more interesting. And it also makes this a much harder experience. And animals can be really helpful to us, and if we observe them, but we don't. We think of animals as less than, and we do this with people. That we have to stop this. We have to stop thinking of other things as better or worse, because that mentality is man-made. It does not really exist. It's an idea that we made up, and we teach it to people from birth, so they don't think it's made up. They think it's just the way that it is. Some things are better than, some people are better. Hey, look at me, I can write a screenplay. That means I'm a superior being. No, it doesn't. Because what is the value of that? I was watching American Horror Story, and this new season that they had, it's called Double Feature, and it's split into two parts. The first part is called Red Tide, and the second part is called Death Valley. For those who don't know, American Horror Story is an anthology series where every season is a totally different plot, but it's all played by the same actors and they're playing different characters. Sometimes the characters interact, and even when the two characters are played by the same actors, they don't acknowledge it. They act like they don't look exactly the same, which is interesting. But it's always interesting to see a totally new storyline with the same familiar actors and the same writers and the same general kind of theme of like a new type. Like the first season was Murder House and then Asylum and Coven and Freak Show. Like they dealt with all these different things, but great writing every time. The new season, Red Tide, had a theme about writers. And spoiler alert, there was this pill that you take, and you know whatever, if you have any kind of talent at all, it activates something and you just start working like a machine. If you're a writer, if you're a singer, whatever it is, if you're a writer, you're going to type, and you're just going to type out a full screenplay in like a day. And if you take this black pill and you don't have any talent, you just lose your hair, and you become really pale, and you just feel like you just don't belong in the world, and you become really bitter and angry and aggressive. But the price is that what this does is that it helps activate that part of your body to make you passionate if you have a talent. If you don't have a talent, then you just get cast aside to become one of the pale people. But the thing is that with this pill, it depletes your blood, and it makes you crave. It depletes things inside of you that are in blood, and it makes you crave blood. So you have to be killing people and drinking their blood in order to function while you're on this pill. And the problem with that is that it immediately presumes that the work that you're doing is more valuable than the life that you're taking. And, obviously the writers are not stupid, they acknowledge this. But they bring up an interesting point that I want to talk about. And they even said something like, talented people are just simply superior. And it's demonstrated with the pale people being bald and wandering around and bitter that they thought they had talent, and then they had to find out that they didn't, and they're worthless, and they just become monsters wandering around in a graveyard looking like Nosferatu. It just it's really interesting to see how these people genuinely believe that they are superior. But what is it all for? Sure, you're taking people's lives so that you can create art and put it out into the world. But if you would kill people in the world, what is the point of the art that you're making? Is it really to help people? Is it to contribute to the world? Which begs the question, what if you were alone? What if you were put in a situation where, in order to get greater and greater and greater, you had to keep destroying everything and everyone around you? And then you're alone. Now you look around and there's just nothing on any side of you. And think, what did I do this for? Where did my value system come from? I had this goal in my mind, this thing that I wanted, and I kind of never really asked myself, why exactly do I want this? Where does that want come from? Is it coming from within, or is it coming from something I was taught to want, taught to believe by society? Because that happens a lot. You are told to want things. You're told this is what you're supposed to go for, this is what you're supposed to want, make these goals, have these values, blah blah blah. And then the problem with it is that we don't see these things through to their end. We don't ask ourselves these questions like, what will actually come of this? Does this feed into the same mentality that will result in me being all alone? And there's been a lot of really good TV shows and movies that have depicted this in a really perfect way, where if you watch it, you're like, oh shit. And that's what I like about movies and TV shows and books and just, art, creative art in general, is that it has a way of impacting you that just simply talking like this can't do. And that's why I would write, that's why I would make movies, because not only does it kind of light that fire inside me and make me feel like I'm doing something I can be happy with and proud of, but I know that people can watch it and understand what I'm saying. It's my language, it's my way of communicating. I don't think it makes me better than you. I just think it's my contribution to the world. And I think you have something you can do that will make you feel the same way. We need to stop comparing ourselves to one another because it doesn't help. It doesn't get you anywhere. You know, do you want to believe that you're a worthless pale person who just deserves to wander around in a graveyard? Or do you want to find what you have to offer the world so that you can actually feel like you don't just deserve to die? And people don't want to go there. Like I said, death and pain, two things we instinctively are constantly trying to avoid. You don't ever want to draw a conclusion that makes you think the only option is death, like you have no reason to live. So when people draw these conclusions without directly realizing that that's the conclusion they drew, they tend to avoid directly facing that information and just kind of become numb. And I mentioned numb people at the beginning of this, the people who just kind of meander and they're not really, they're floating. They're not really aiming anywhere. They're just like, yeah, just want to do this and do that and not have any, small talk and not really care about things. And that's always bothered me because I can feel it. I can feel that there's something heavy underneath it and toxic, something that isn't being dealt with, something that's there and they're just pretending it's not. And you wouldn't drive with a blindfold. You wouldn't be driving in a dangerous road where you're like, holy shit, there's a bunch of obstacles in the road. How am I ever going to do this? I don't believe that I am strong or smart enough to, maneuver my way around this complicated path in the road. So I'm just going to keep driving because I can't really take my foot off the pedal. That would be committing suicide. And I'm going to just keep driving, but I'm going to put a blindfold on so I don't really see where I'm going. And then guess what? Just going to keep crashing into shit. And then you're going to blame everyone else. Which, some people don't have the capacity to do that. Some people are so numb and blocked off. They don't care. They're not interested in blaming anybody. Even that is too low and negative and toxic for them to face. But, like, then there's the people who have a victimhood mentality and they just want to blame everybody. They're constantly complaining. They're constantly a victim in every situation. They're never the person who messed up. They never did something wrong. It's always look at circumstance A, B, and C that led to C, D, E. Like, just you have to understand that you're not a victim in any situation. You have to realize that you're empowered because I can't really talk about this without getting into my personal philosophy on the universe, which, like I said, is another video, and I'll probably do that at some point if you want to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you know when I go live and do that. And if you miss it, it'll still be on my channel so you can watch it later. If you're interested, of course. If you're not, obviously, you don't have to. But I don't want to do that in this video because it would just be misleading with the title. So, you have to believe, though, that you're empowered because if you forget that, like the river example that I gave earlier, with that analogy, you're floating on a river, and when you are stopping that flow, it's only going to hurt you because it's still going. You've just decided to stop believing that, which is the same as driving with a blindfold. It doesn't help you to pretend it away, it doesn't actually make it go away. So we have to stop neglecting this reality that there are things that are dangerous and what if? I just want you to think about this. I personally don't believe in hell. I could give you a whole, really detailed explanation of why I'm certain that there is no hell, at least not in that sense. I don't believe that there's punishment for the way that you lived your life. I don't believe that you live your life one way and then you die and then for eternity, your eternity is based on the decisions you made when you were alive in that one time. That's not how I believe it works. I can explain why that is, but look, that's not this video. What I want you to do is just stop and think about all the different possibilities. I want you to do research and think about for yourself what you think about the idea of heaven and hell and all the different religions' depictions of heaven and hell. And I want you to think about if you're absolutely certain that there is no afterlife, there is no heaven, there is no hell. And if you are certain, why are you certain? What irrefutable proof have you seen? Is it just that it makes more sense? Is it just that you're afraid to consider it? Because if there is a hell, you're probably going there and you think that in the back of your mind, so you just decided to be an atheist. Like, what is it? Because a lot of people that I find who are atheists and who are really against anything to do with like spirituality or just anything to do with something that can't be tangible. You can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't touch it with the five senses. there is no sixth sense. Basically, just that mentality, really rigid and narrow, and again, based on control. I want you to ask yourself, is this based on fact? Is this based on objective truth? Or is it coming from a place of fear and control? Your desire to believe this. Is it a desire to believe this, or would you rather believe that other things are true? But whatever it is, I just want you to think about it and let me know in the comments. Excuse me, I keep burping, I'm sorry. Um, I just want you to think about it and let me know in the comments what you come up with. Doesn't matter, there is no right answer. Just really genuinely sit with it and ask yourself what your reasons are for believing what you believe and how you can be absolutely certain that it's the truth. And I also am curious because I love hearing about this kind of stuff. I don't care what you believe. I don't care um, if you're a Christian, if you're Muslim, if you're Jewish. It doesn't make a difference to me if you're atheist, agnostic. I don't care. Just make up a religion, whatever it is. Just tell me what you believe. Tell me why you're certain that it's the truth. And tell me if you really are certain that it's the truth. Tell me if you think there's any slight possible chance that you could be wrong. And if you think there definitely isn't a chance, explain why. Because there's got to be an interest. I mean, really, if you think that there's no chance at all that you're wrong, that's groundbreaking, man. Because we've been arguing about religion pretty much since as long as we've been around. So if you've really found the ultimate truth, I would absolutely love to hear uh, a clear explanation of why it's definitely the truth. And if it doesn't convince me, I'm going to explain why it didn't convince me. And I don't want you to take that as me trying to start an argument. I'm just trying to explain why it didn't change my mind. And then maybe I can give you something to think about. Because if you're like, well, if I thought that this meant it was definitely the truth, and you were able to hear that and it didn't mean that to you, then maybe you know something I don't. That's my mentality with other people. That's why I let people tell me stuff like this, because maybe you know something I don't. Maybe I can tell you all this stuff and you're like, actually, I still don't believe you. And I'm like, all right, well, what do you know? What do you know? Tell me. And I would love to hear it. And unfortunately, I give people the chance to tell me and they never tell me anything different. They just say the same thing. And the thing that I usually hear is it's usually cognitive. It's like I studied and researched this religion and it makes the most sense. Okay, well, if it makes the most sense, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the objective truth. It has too many coincidences to not be true. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true either. There are plenty of other explanations for the coincidences I've heard. I could give an example of Islam. The religion has this, there's this video that explains a bunch of things about Islam that are in. Hello?
Hey, Tristan, I just want to let you know I'm running to the reservation to get cigarettes. I'll be back about an hour.
Okay.
Okay? Love you.
Love you too. My grandma's going to get cigarettes. Um, I don't know if you could hear her through the door. Obviously, she doesn't know I'm doing a video. This is why I usually do this in the middle of the night, for those of you who don't know. Because she was not, I think she was outside when I decided to go live, so I couldn't really tell her that I was going to go live. And I also just did this randomly. I didn't think I was going to be going for this long. People don't usually knock on my door. I didn't think it was going to happen. But hey, it happened. It's not a big deal. Um, anyway, what was I saying? Um, religion, people think that they're right. Yeah, okay. So people will say that there's coincidences, and Islam had this video talking about all these coincidences and things that were in like the original texts from before a lot of science and research was around, saying things about like iron falling from the sky and humans being mostly water and pain sensors being in the skin, stuff like this. Just as like three examples that I remember from the video, and they're saying that this was in like the scripture and everything long before we were able to prove and understand these things scientifically. So that must mean that Islam is definitely the one true religion. And, you know, first of all, don't go in with the assumption that there is a one true religion. That's already, a lot of these people who think they found the truth are doing it with these pre-drawn conclusions instead of coming in fully curious and unbiased. If you come in where you're completely curious and humble, you're not trying to control anything, you're just that little kid watching the ants go. You have no bias, you have no fear, you're not afraid that you're going to go to hell if you get it wrong. You're just watching it. And that's all. You're just watching it, you're studying it with no low vibrating intentions. You're just there. You're just in the moment. You're observing it. And people don't go in with that mentality. People have this idea that there is a one true religion and you have to find it. So, wait a minute, this one has all these coincidences. It must be the one true religion. Well, first of all, there are a million other explanations for those coincidences. That does not prove anything. And there's actually a lot more evidence for other faiths and other things that have nothing to do with Islam. But I believe that there's truth in every religion. I believe that religions, at least the popular ones, didn't just come out of nowhere. They didn't just, some asshole trying to control people didn't just pull it out of his ass. He pulled some of it. There's mistranslations. If you look at Christianity in the Bible, there's a lot of different versions of it because it was not originally written in English. So it was mistranslated a lot of times, and often with the intention of controlling people. And it kind of became political, and it turned into a political scam at some point. It's just so much of Christianity has just been completely whitewashed. It's really embarrassing in America, especially. But Christianity is the driving force behind a lot of these conservatives and Republicans whose value are ironically not Christian like. If you actually read the Bible, you would not assume that your values would be conservative. To me, a Christian conservative should be an oxymoron, but but that's usually what you hear. Usually, if you're Christian, you're going to be conservative, and usually, if you're conservative, you're going to be Christian. So these two things go together for some reason, and they really have nothing to do with each other because Christianity, love thy neighbor as thyself, it preached against valuing money and power over love and relationships and connection with the earth. But it also teaches you things like don't take my name in vain and angry gods and judgmental shit like that to scare you and to keep you in line, which is what the political stuff I'm talking about. And all sorts of ideas. I understand that there were apparently mistranslations like man shall not lie with boy, which was talking about pedophilia, and then it was turned into man shall not lie with man. It turned into homophobia, stuff like that. But I also understand that people are homophobic because they believe that just looking at the anatomy of it, a man fits into a woman and creates a child. Man plus woman equals life continued. But again, it's this arrogance, it's this attempt to control things. If you actually observe it neutral and you're not trying to judge or control, you're just kind of there watching the ants carry their food and wondering what's going on. You look at the leaf, you look at little tiny things and just observe and appreciate. If you're actually looking at it from that mentality, then you can observe even in nature with that example that other species have homosexual activity and they have a purpose. Like they take in babies that don't have parents. Maybe their parents were killed or whatever happened. But they have a purpose and they don't just exist just to be an abomination. And it's the same with humans. Let me put it like this: if you don't understand homosexuality, and in this case you would probably be straight, um, if you're a woman, then you understand already what it's like to be a gay man, and if you're a man, then you understand what it's like to be a lesbian. That's it. You get it. You're able to look at a woman and feel that same attraction, and you're not turned on by men. And if you're a straight woman, you're able to look at men and feel that attraction, and you're not turned on by women. So that's exactly what it feels like. You couldn't get off to a woman if you tried because you're a straight woman. Women don't turn you on in that way. You can't control that. So you already understand what that's like. You understand that it's not something you have any control over. But you have to also understand that if you grew up in a society that was constantly telling you that you're supposed to be attracted to women, you could trick yourself. You could convince yourself that maybe you are and maybe you just don't know because you really don't know. You're supposed to have the freedom to explore and try stuff out and figure yourself out without all of this all these angry people around you trying to tell you what's right and wrong, but they're not angry, they're afraid, and they're also miserable. Remember what I said earlier about joy. These people are not happy. You really have to ask yourself, am I happy, and are the people who I'm afraid of happy? And if the answer is no to both of those, there's fear involved, I can tell you that much. And it's not helpful, it's not healthy, and it's not based in reality. You've separated yourself. You're being disproportionate, and it's not going to get you anywhere. It's just going to hurt you and hold you down and hold you back, and it's going to cause you to become unpleasant to other people as well, and they're going to have to set boundaries with you. On one hand, you're teaching them healthier boundaries, you're teaching them lessons, but I just think of it as the universe teaching them lessons through you, using your bad behavior, turning it into something useful for other people. Because at every turn we have opportunities to learn, and we have to choose to take that opportunity. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. You have to choose to do it yourself. Nobody can do it for you. And in that way, you're learning, you're becoming stronger. You're not just this lazy, helpless person who's constantly having everybody do everything for them, which would make your existence meaningless. Because then what are you other than just a tool? But even a tool is a humble, noble thing to be serving something, to be a spoon, helping somebody else eat. You're not just kind of what you're doing wouldn't be useful or helpful. It would just sort of be taking and taking and taking for nothing. You're here to learn and grow. And if you're just being babied and walked down the path the whole time, then you're not really being of service in any way, shape, or form. You're just kind of taking help and never really doing anything with it. It's like, instead of putting something in and having something else come out the other side, you're just a wood chipper and it just gets destroyed. And all the help and love and support that goes into you just comes out the other side trash. And you don't utilize it because you don't see that you have a reason to. And some people, narcissists and sociopaths build their whole lives around the idea that they can live like this and control other people. And instead of learning to live for themselves, they learn how to use other people to do what they want. And they are very sociopaths are very, very numb. It's not a mental disorder. A lot of people have that misconception. A psychopath is a mental disorder. A psychopath is someone who's born, the brain just works different. Again, like I said earlier, nobody is better or worse than anybody. This doesn't make you a bad person. Doesn't make you dangerous. Doesn't mean that, oh, if you're born a psychopath, you're inevitably going to become a serial killer. We might as well just kill you if you're born a psychopath. Not how it works. No. If you are born and your brain works differently, I don't like the word psychopath. And again, it's because we make this shit up. We have to remember language is made up. It didn't always exist. And oftentimes, terms that we use are misleading and uh, unhelpful for understanding what actually is going on. So, a psychopath versus a sociopath, not born that way. They become that way after something else. Psychopath is just born that way. They're just different. So a psychopath is often thought of as someone who's very cold and emotionless and still able to be successful because it's not that they're angry at society. A sociopath usually will not make it too far because they're too impulsive, but a psychopath has more self-control and they just don't have as much empathy or anything. So they seem like a dangerous person, but again, this can be taken care of if you understand. The same way that a 6 foot tall person can't go through a 2 foot door. Like, you have to be able to fit inside of things. You have to just understand where you can fit and how you can function in the world. And you can't just always expect to be able to do everything. So that's okay. You know, I would not call anybody a psychopath, unless their behavior was psychotic. I would say it to kind of make them realize that they were acting insane, but I would never actually call someone who had a mental um, disability or illness or anything that is holding them back from just functioning like a average person. I would never call them a psychopath because I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's realistic. I think that it gives them the idea that there's something wrong with them. There's a lot of negativity attached to that word because a psychopath is not a good person. When have you ever called someone a psychopath as a compliment? Whenever have you ever called someone a psychopath as a medical term that you're diagnosing them and you're just doing it to help them? It's like, well, you're a psychopath, but here's the prescription. It's like, you know it doesn't help to call someone that. I think you just need to understand here's what's going on. I guess you could call this neurodivergence, but I don't know. To me, that just seems like a stupid term because everyone is different. And I don't really know that there is neurotypical. So I think that it's really pointless to think about these kinds of things. And I understand that there are all sorts of terms in science and studies and stuff, but you have to really ask yourself, is this actually, is there a point to this? All these studies that we're doing, what is this actually for? What is it accomplishing? What does it do? Usually it doesn't really do much. It's just kind of there. And people will use it for whatever agenda they personally have. Because people have agendas. People have their personal goals that they want to make this happen. So they just pick apart whatever they can find to feed their narrative. And again, you have to be able to look at things from a standby, humble, curious perspective. Be humble, be curious, don't be judgmental, don't be controlling, don't be fearful. Don't come from a place of ego and fear and control, come from a place of empathy and love and faith. That's a good way to think of it, if you want. But, you know, you have to you have to realize that there's a lot of misinformation floating around. And I realize this was meant to be about politics and religion. If you want me to connect it all back to that, politically, I think that there are no right and wrong sides to take, no matter where you are in the world. I think that there is only psychology, and I've always said the triple P: psychology, politics, and philosophy. You can't have one without the other. They all go together. All three of these things are interconnected because if you look at politics, you start with politics, you're going to end up looking at the psychology behind it because politics is the rules. It's the system. Politics is the way that we do things. We're all here. We can't argue that we're all here. You just picture a bunch of people who just came off a boat and landed on a land and they're all here. And it's like, all right, well now what do we do? We don't all think the same way. We don't all talk the same way. We don't all agree. So how do we build a system? That's politics. It's trying to figure that out. Then you have to go into psychology, look inward, look at their brains, look at the factors that affect their behavior, and try to understand the details of what's actually going on. Because people aren't often honest. People lie. Because people will tend to do whatever's easier. People don't tell you, um, I feel this way because of this. They'll tell you, this is happening because it is. And they'll just be very matter of fact and they'll talk about the situation. It's never them, it's always projected onto this. But if you really look at it, most of the time when people are talking about objective situations, there's a personal connection to it that they have. And it's not really what they're saying it is. So be introspective. Don't be afraid to look in and see things that you don't like. Don't be afraid to see dark parts of yourself. Anything that you're ashamed of, any shames or guilt that you're carrying around, you don't be afraid to look at it. Don't be afraid to acknowledge it. It doesn't make you a bad person. There is no good and bad in the world. There are no good and bad people. There's just truth and not truth. That's it. That's all that there really is. And you're only going to be able to exist in the world when you're aligned with the truth. And otherwise, you're going to be somewhere else. Like the cooking example I gave. You're going to be off reading a book while you're cooking something in the oven at the same time. You have to be fully there in the moment and be realistic and proportionate with what's going on. So, that's the truth. You have to be honest. You have to say, I can handle this. I'm not weak. I'm not, crippled to the point where I just can't do this. I'm weak. I need to be carried through this. Like the thing that I mentioned before with like somebody babying you through your life and, then you're a wood chipper. Don't have that mentality. Even if you are actually crippled and you can't walk, don't be afraid to try because like I keep saying, it doesn't matter what is affecting you. It doesn't matter if you're half a person, literally. Just be born just no legs. It doesn't make a difference. You could be born with no arms and you're still a human being. You still are alive and you still can make it in the world and have something to do. If you're going to be constantly comparing yourself to other people, you're probably going to want to kill yourself because you're going to realize that everybody else wants to make sure you know that you're not as good as them People love to show you what they can do that you can't do because they would hate to look at what they can't do that you can do. Nobody wants to look at their faults. Nobody wants to acknowledge what makes them imperfect because people have an idea in their head that there is good and bad, and that if you're bad, if you if you aren't perfect in every way, if you have faults, that means that you're a bad person, and that means that you are not worth shit. And again, this leads to the hell mentality. If there's a hell, you'll probably go there. If there isn't, then why bother existing? Because then you just become numb, and you still continue to live, but you don't think too much about it. You just kind of are that type of person who's just like, I know I do a lot of bad shit, but hey, there's no good and bad. I'm an atheist. Blah blah blah. You just do whatever makes you happy. Do whatever you want. Doesn't matter who you have to kill to get whatever you want. Like that type of shit. Like, or just lazy. It's not like you're actively saying, "Oh, I don't have to kill anyone," but you're just maybe sitting on you're a couch potato, and you're not helping anyone. You're not hurting anyone, but in a way, you are hurting yourself. Um, because you're not really living. You're just kind of there, and you refuse to face the parts of yourself that you're not proud of because you think it makes you a bad person. When you fully sit with that and face that and acknowledge that you are a bad person, the only real solution is to die or to just numb yourself so that you can live without thinking about the fact that you have no real reason to live because you have nothing to contribute because you're a bad person. But that's not true. None of that is true. There's no such thing as a good person or a bad person. So if we get this out of our heads, if we're not afraid to think of ourselves as both good and bad, with the capacity for good and bad things, and realize that we are both, you know, um, in everything, we're light and dark. We have that, and you can't be afraid of the dark within you, because it's like driving with a blindfold. It doesn't go away just because you're not looking at it, and you're gonna get in an accident. You have to be able to face it, and it's hard. You might want to have a therapist help you out. You might want to do some like meditation and whatever kind of thing you can discover that can help you to look inward and really face what's there. But really, you do have the ability to do it on your own. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for help. You should always ask for help. That's okay. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it on your own. It doesn't mean that you need someone else to help you. But you have to remember that nobody can do it for you. Either way, it's going to be you doing it. It's just, you can walk there yourself, which might be hard and nerve wracking if you're not used to it, if you've been afraid of it for so long. So have somebody walk you there, but they can't just push you in. You have to choose to put one foot in front of the other. So they can't carry you. You have to walk. Like it's okay. So just relax and let go of the good and bad mentality. It's not easy, but it's possible. And the first step is acknowledging that it's something worth doing, and just go from there. Don't fall into procrastination and all sorts of other toxic things that just eventually keep beating you up and taking a toll on things that you feel guilty and ashamed of. Because what happens when you procrastinate is that you're subconsciously aware that there's something you feel you're supposed to be doing that you're neglecting to do, which is going to make you feel guilty and shameful. And you can push that down, but it's still there. And if there's things that you you maybe are procrastinating that you don't really have to do, you could avoid doing them. That's that's the thing. You have to always um, be all in with what you're doing. Don't be double minded. Don't be feeling like you have to either do something or don't. If you're gonna do something that maybe you think isn't the best thing to do, still just do it. Because if you're gonna do it anyway, it's like if you're gonna do something, do it right. If you're gonna do something, just fully embrace it. Don't ever do something and then be like, I think of an example like maybe you're asking someone to help you with something. Hey, I feel really bad about asking this, but could you maybe help me do this? Because I kind of feel like I can't do it by myself, and I really need you to help me do it. And I feel so bad asking. Like, no, just go in and say, hey, can you help me do this? I can't do it by myself. Period. That's it. Just be confident. Be all in, and or don't. Maybe you can find a way to do it yourself. If you're going to be all guilty about it and like, oh, I feel really bad asking it, then just don't ask. Do it yourself. And if you really can't do it yourself, then ask, and ask shamelessly. Ask confidently. Pick one. Stop trying to have it both ways, because it's it's eating away at you. You know, when you do that, it's like it comes with the exact same emotion as when you're procrastinating something and you feel shameful and guilty. Shame and guilt comes from when you believe that you did something that you shouldn't have done. You have to stop and understand that realistically, you can either do something or you're not going to do it. You have to stop thinking about the stuff that you have done. Realistically, think about the thing. Maybe you've hurt people and you want to make amends, whatever it is. But you can't change it. And sometimes the best way to make amends with someone is just to genuinely change, and then they'll notice it. You don't have to go out seeking to apologize to them and excuse me and make amends with everybody that you hurt. You know, you don't have to do that. You can just change, and they'll notice if they're still in your life. And even if they're not, like, it's up to you. Do you want them in your life? You know, like, just don't worry about it. Just kind of go along with it and make sure that you're mainly focused on yourself. Remember that when you're making amends with people, it's not about how it goes, it's not about the other person, it's just about what you want. And you're not always going to get what you want in life because other people have free will and you can't control the world around you. But you can always control yourself, which is why that should always be your priority. What do I want? Um, how can I get what I want? And why do I want it? You know, make sure you know, because sometimes you don't really want it. Like I said, is it coming from you or is it an outside factor that's tricked you into thinking it's something you want? That happens way too often. And it's disheartening because I hate to see people going after something and they don't really know why they want it, but they think they do. You know, if you ask them, they'll give you a detailed answer, but it just sounds like they're regurgitating information they've been fed if you pay close enough attention. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I went for way longer than I planned to. 86 minutes and 25 seconds. That's not terrible. I've gone longer, um, but it's not great. And I'm gonna end it because I don't want to be rambling on and on and on and on. I talked about politics. I talked about religion. And to summarize it, politically, um, it's just about finding a way to work together, prioritize joy, and living your life purpose, and being humble and curious, and make sure that all the political systems are based around that and that those are up at the top. Those are the priorities. And then you suddenly realize how many other things really aren't that necessary. And all the things that you're like, I know it kind of sucks, but what other option is there? When you really understand that that is all that matters, you start to see that there are plenty of other options. If you just kind of wipe the slate clean and draw up a plan without basing it on what's already there, you realize that it could be so much simpler and so much more effective. And people could actually be happy in a political system. And religion, most religions are designed to use fear and control to get people to do what they want. And only some popular religions at least, exist to genuinely help people. But in general, I would stray from anything that um, uses fear in any way to get you to do anything. If your religion teaches punishment and reward, but not for the sense of like law of attraction, like if you throw a rock in the water, there's going to be ripples. If you touch fire, you're going to get burned. That's punishment and reward. But it's not that if you have sex with a man, you're gonna get burned in hell forever. Like, and you're a man. Like, that's kind of the disproportionate stuff that I'm talking about. And the idea of these things, I get where it came from, but it just gets so twisted into something totally different, which is what I'm talking about. How we most religions have truth in them because if you actually look at their origins, they were based in truth, and you still have to know that they were man-made. God did not come down and write a book for you. He did not come down and make a religion. In most of these religions, what they're claiming is that these spiritual beings communicated with them, which is very possible, but probably exaggerated and misinterpreted. The details of it is often metaphorical and not meant to be taken literally, and we take everything literally. Because if you understand spirituality and mediumistic ability and psychic ability and communication and telepathy and all sorts of things like that, and energy and how that works, the psychology of energy communication, which is not my thing. That's a it's called the Peck method, psychology of energy communication method, and it basically it's by Ivy Rivera. It's an original method that she came up with to teach people how to communicate with energy. And if you understand this, it's anybody can learn it and anybody can see the results and understand that it's not just like your imagination. You have an imagination. You absolutely have an imagination, but you have to know the difference. And you can know the difference by seeing results, by sitting someone down and channeling information for them. You just pick someone up off the street and just set them down, and then you're suddenly telling them information about like their work and their career, and they don't have to say anything. You don't even have to look at them, and everything you're saying is going to resonate with them if you train. You know what you're doing, but you don't really even have to be trained. You just have to be willing to receive what you're getting. But people are so stuck in their own head that they block this stuff as it's trying to come into them, because that's what we are. We're just wide open channels, and we can receive energy. We are energy. But it's absolutely possible. There's all sorts of things that exist. Like I said, you have to view it with that humble curiosity. There's all sorts of things that exist, all sorts of infinite possibilities, all sorts of beings and creatures, because none of it is real. So it's all real. It's just so I said something the other day that I thought was really interesting. I said, how can you be sure you exist? What is your basis for comparison? So just think about that. How can you be sure you exist? What are you comparing it to? What does it feel like to not exist? How do you know? This is all we've ever known. So how do we even know what this is? Is this existence? Is this nothing? How would we know the difference? We wouldn't. So just think about it. And I want to talk about how that connects to religion, because I was trying to summarize politics and religion. And when you get sucked into believing something like, well, in the history of this, it makes the most sense that this must be real, because how could they have made this up? Well, maybe they didn't make it up. Maybe they really heard something from Spirit. Maybe Spirit told them something. And this is how they interpreted it. And then when they went back and told everybody what they heard, the information that they had was accurate because it came from Spirit. But they still interpreted it in their own way. And maybe for attention, they described it in a more dramatic way. Maybe it was written down in a more dramatic way. You don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities. And that's what you have to keep in mind, is that a lot of the stuff that you consider proof, there are different possibilities that you're not considering. So I'm just trying to give you something to think about and to be a little bit more curious and less controlling of the situation. It always pisses me off, though, when people say that stuff that I believe is against science. I've had arguments with people where they're like, yeah, well, that's scientifically impossible. There's no, like, paranormal activity, and there's no ghosts. Ghosts can't, like, move stuff and change stuff. Okay, well, first of all, you say this is scientifically impossible, and yet you have never shown me any scientific evidence against it. This is what blows my mind the most, is that people have been brainwashed to believe that these things are against science, and they've never been given a shred of evidence that it is. Ever. I've looked. I've looked very hard. Is there proof against any of this stuff? I've searched all over the internet trying to find proof against it, and all I'm finding is proof for it. And a bunch of people saying, is this stuff real? Is there proof for it? And I'm like, no, I'm looking for proof against it, and I cannot find a thing. And I can't even find the most basic thing to disprove it. And the closest thing I got to that was one person sent me an article saying that this article disproves it. I read it, and it didn't disprove anything. It really was just a bunch of like understandings and theories. It wasn't evidence. It was just theories. So it really bothers me when people claim something is scientifically impossible without anything to back it up. I could give you a lot to back up what I'm saying. And if you can't do the same, how dare you judge me for it? How dare you discredit me without even giving me a chance? Who do you think you are? Um, be more humble, be more curious, let go of control. It's okay. We're here to have fun. We're here to learn, we're here to play, we're here to just enjoy life. We're not here to control everything and be afraid all the time. That sounds like a horrible, miserable experience. We're not here to be having fun all the time. It's not supposed to be 100% rainbows and butterflies, but you're not supposed to deprive yourself of that either. You can have both. You know, it's like going to school. You know, there's recess, there's a playground. You're not supposed to just be sitting there like a miserable robot learning the whole time, but you're supposed to feel safe and trust that in a fire there's a fire drill. Like, you have systems to take care of you in situations of danger, and you have to keep your wits about you in those situations, but that doesn't mean that you have to be ahead of the game the whole time and get information when there's going to be a fire drill versus an actual fire, and you know, just jump ahead of the game and make sure that you're the first one out of the call. You can relax and stay in line and trust that you'll be okay. And that's sort of just a metaphor for trusting the kind of universal system that exists, because you don't understand it. You're just kind of here, and it's all a mystery. Like I said, you don't even have a basis for comparison when thinking about existence. And um and because everything exists as far as you know, even black holes and things that you perceive as nothing are still technically something, because if you can perceive it at all, it's not nothing. Nothing by definition is nothing. It's imperceivable. It's not, um if that's a word, but either way, you know what I mean. It's not tangible. It's not there. It's just nothing. It's the absence of something. So everything is something, but that means that everything is the same thing, and you have nothing to compare it to. So just think about that, and think about religion. Think about why you believe your religion. I told everyone earlier to leave comments talking about why you believe what you believe, and just you know, explain it. So I would appreciate if you do that. I'm gonna end now because I'm almost at 100 minutes. So thank you for watching this random live stream. I hope I made sense, and I hope I hope I didn't leave anything unfinished. I know I go off on a lot of tangents. I'm sure I said some things that I meant to come back to that I didn't come back to, which is why these go on for so long, and I don't end them because I'm like, wait, I had more to say. But I needed to vent. I feel good that I talked. I would have been talking not for this long. I don't go on rants this long by myself. Usually if I'm going on a rant by myself, it lasts maybe 10-15 minutes, because I don't have to explain everything. I know what I mean, so I can go on a rant by myself and not have to be going off on tangents, because I know what I'm trying to say. I know what I mean. I can do that quickly in my head in a split second, in a flash, because I know exactly what I'm thinking. So it takes longer to have to explain it to an audience who might have no idea what I'm talking about, and then I have to explain that, and it just branch off in all different ways. But if I left anything unfinished, if you watched this and you were like, wait, you never went back and finished that, go ahead and tell me in the comments what I didn't say. If there's nothing, then good. Um, and I hope to see you next time I go live. Thank you for watching. I think I had up to 5 people watching this at one point, and as of right now, this has 4 likes, so I appreciate that. I'll see you next time I see you, or you'll see me. I don't really see you guys, I just see your comments. And I usually don't know you. Sometimes I do, usually I don't. So thank you for watching. And if you want to catch my next live stream, I don't know when it's going to be, so just turn on notifications and subscribe. Somebody said, okay, bye-bye, be safe. Thank you. You too.